Hi, I'm Linda Winter, and this is Ben Marshall, and we're going to be talking about Marcelli's stocking templates.
We have three different versions available. They have the traditional stocking, the pet version with the paw print, and the fancier elf version as well.
And this one actually comes with a 4.5-inch circle. So if you wanted to fussy cut and feature one of those favorite characters from the fabrics, you can put this in a circle. Monograms, appliques, all kinds of things. We're going to show you a couple different techniques with a cuff, without a cuff, and then one without a cuff that we're going to make into a cuff. So the inside becomes the outside. We'll show you how to cut with our rotary cutters, making it more accurate, faster, easier. Talk about our get a grip materials as well. And then we're going to show you a couple techniques that are really fast, easy stockings so you can get in that assembly line method and whip them out. Because our templates have that get a grip material, most everything I'm doing, I can use our 45mm rotary cutter. Martelli does make three sizes though. We have the 60mm, here's the 45mm, that's the standard one, and we make a 28mm. Right-handed over here, left-handed over here. That get a grip material on our templates, you can see how that fabric stays and my cutters are staying. So everything that I do is about accuracy, consistency. I'm going to move these aside and I want to just talk about our rotary cutter for just a second with the various templates. This template, I've got some nice big, not straight, but pretty straight cuts that I can make. So that 45mm is going to work really well. When I get over to a curve like this, and on our elf stocking where I've got that curve, that's when that 28mm really will come in handy. All right, so I'm going to show you the cutting and then Ben is going to show you the assembly. I've got the front and back fabric here for the stocking. So if you think about, we've got the stocking fabric and then I've got the lining fabric. A lining fabric is really nice to have a contrast, but again, is that lining fabric going to be something that people are going to be seeing where we want to take advantage of it? If I choose to have this fabric different than my back side of my stocking, then how I lay the stocking out will make a difference. If I had one piece of fabric here and a different fabric here, and I wanted the stocking to be going to the right side versus the left side, you're going to need to plan out, do I work on the front side or am I going to be cutting on the inside of the fabric? So that's something to think about. I'm going to be cutting because I have the same on the front and back. I'm going to be cutting the lining and the stocking itself. I don't have anything that stands out here in my fabric, so it really doesn't matter where I place this. I'm going to be looking at not wasting my fabric. So I'm going to get that close along here. But if you had fabric that you wanted to highlight, one of the things you could do is on your stocking, take it to the mat and find the middle of the stocking and put a hash mark, a hash mark, a hash mark, a hash mark. And then if I had something right here that I wanted to be in the center, I would fold in half on that, fold in half, go put a chalk pencil mark here, a chalk pencil mark here, a chalk pencil mark here, a chalk pencil mark here. Line up those chalks with the middle of your template. So if we wanted to fussy cut something or have something featured, that's a great way to be able to do it. Okay, so as a lefty, I'm going to be cutting from my left side. You guys that are right-handed, I'd be cutting over here, so we'd be using our rotary cutter cutting along here. What's cool about the get a grip is, again, when I move this, the fabric stays with it. I'm not using a paper template and worrying about destroying that paper template the first time I cut. I'm going to go ahead and cut. If you've noticed, my right hand is here. This is going to be your left hand for most of you. I'm holding this down with a little bit of pressure. I'm going to cut. When I get to here, I've got two options. I can turn the template and continue to cut. So I'll take off to where, or I'll start where I left off and continue on, or I can do what I call cutting off, where I cut here. I'm basically going to be moving that template and I'm going to cut off again. It's just a matter of me choosing, do I want to try to move that template as I cut, continuing to go, or cutting to where basically it's just kind of that. See how I'm cutting off there? So cutting off versus cutting around. I move that template as I go. If you wear glasses, you'll want to put your glasses on so you can see along that edge. And notice what this hand is doing. I'm changing from here to here, whatever feels right. When we get to here, this is where that 28mm is really going to come in handy if you have that 28mm. If you don't, you're going to grab a chalk pencil and you can go draw around those areas. Before you get started on cutting all of this, if you know you're going to have issues right here, just draw with a chalk pencil. I'm not so concerned about cutting exactly, so if I'm afraid I'm going to cut into the template and do some damage to that, I can just kind of loosely get around that edge. So you know how good you are with that rotary cutter as to whether you want to fool with that or not. I move that template and I am going to go right to that last part where I've already started and get that piece there. So what have I done? I've cut my linings and I've cut my outside, and the only thing to decide is, do I want to have a cuff or no cuff? So on this stocking, we're going to do a cuff.
So I have my lining piece and my outside piece. I also have the cuff piece here, and you'll notice I've just pressed it in half, wrong sides together. I also have my loop here. This is just a 2.5-inch strip. Cut to whatever length you want. I've been doing 12 inches. Press it in half and press each seam to the center, similar to the way that you would make bias tape, and you can top stitch along one edge there. So the way that we're going to assemble this is we lay them end to end with the cuff in the middle. So we open it up, and we're going to create this big, long piece. Make sure your toes are both pointing the right direction. In this case, the fabric is the same. It doesn't have a wrong side since it's a solid. But we'll sew each of these together. So the first thing we're going to do is flip it over, right sides together, press it open, and then we'll do the same thing over here, sewing right sides together. And that will give you a big long piece that looks like this. So we will take 2 of those, and on the second one you're going to tuck your loop in, and the loop goes between the lining and the cuff. And after we have those 2 together, we lay them right sides together, and then sew, starting usually on the lining, we sew all the way around and then leave an opening big enough to get your hand into, because we're going to be turning the whole thing wrong side out, or right side out. So after you've stitched everything together, you'll have this big long piece, and as you can see, I've left an opening right here that is big enough for me to get my hand in. Be sure when you're sewing you back stitch at each of these places, because you want that seam to be really strong, because you're going to be reaching in. So we reach in and turn the whole thing right side out. Before you tuck the lining in, be sure you sew that last hole closed.
So Ben just showed you the really quick assembly with a cuff. I want to show you without a cuff. It's basically the same thing, except you notice I don't have any fabric here. We are going to join the lining here to the outside here. Same thing on this other side. Once we stitch those and press those, then we're going to stitch around. Now I do it a little bit differently than Ben. You notice I pinned, and the only reason I pinned was I didn't have my zip guns handy. Zip guns, if you don't know about our zip guns, go grab those. So we could clip, clip, clip here. But if you notice here, I've done my opening that I'm going to be closing down at the bottom, and I changed my pins from going to where I'm sewing to straight. So as I got to there, I would remember, oh, I've got to get rid of those pins, which means I'm not going to stitch those down. And just like he mentioned, once you turn this, then we're going to go ahead and stitch those closed. So this is basically the same as what I just showed you in that last stocking, as far as how I stitched right sides together at the top, no cuff. But notice how I've given it a little bit of a cuff here. What I did was just not tucked it all the way in. I could go to my sewing machine and just top stitch this all the way around. One of the cool things about using fabrics like these coffee bags is that you can really embellish them, making them really kind of dressed up or kind of, you know, rustic and all of that. Go ahead and cut some pieces from the bags, and you can curl these, do all kinds of flowers, all kinds of stuff. This can be a strap that we have here. So you've got a couple different ways that you can kind of embellish. Imagine a thicker piece of ribbon. I've lost the one that I wanted to show you. I didn't add the hanging tag here. So this could be, what I mentioned earlier was 2 pieces that I've done this and I've done this. If I decide later on I want to add this, I'm basically going to hand stitch a button right on top. Imagine a ribbon that was a little bit wider, imagine a button that matches, but that gives it a kind of a neat look. I also want to show you some embellishments. This doesn't match, but you get the idea of how we can really have fun with the stockings. There are all kinds of ribbons out there. Again, these don't match so much, but you get the idea. Pom-poms, rick-rack, there's just a ton of stuff. I use headbands a lot of times for my projects, so those headbands come in all kinds of varieties of colors and things. And again, we can stitch this right here. If you're not sure how long you want it to be, the headband is one fancy way to be able to do that as well. So I have this cuff sticking out just a little bit, but I can also bring this down. So this is a cuff or a stocking without a cuff, but now I've just added a cuff. We didn't add an additional piece of fabric, we've just folded it down. I'm choosing not to do that because I like the distance with the coffee and up here, and again, I would just top stitch all the way around. But play with your fabrics. There are lots of choices out there. Okay, so I want to go over some of those things that I mentioned earlier on with those questions. If you're on a limited amount of time, then these pre-quilted materials are wonderful for you. It gives me the front and back, which is my lining as well, and it can be a cuff too. Ben's going to give me the big stocking so you can see here. Imagine I was on my mat and I could cut that easily. When I make this stocking, again, I'm going to fold. This is the inside. It's going to be the cuff. So that's a cool way to do that one. I'm going to give this back. This turns into, out of a polar fleece. Think of polar fleece and flannel and all those materials. It's minky, not a whole lot of fun to sew with, but boy, it sure looks great when you're finished. But those stretchy fabrics, that's that same stocking that I just used, and these are going to stretch for kids. So that's a fun one to do as well. With the elf stocking that I have here, this doesn't show up unless you stuff it. So if you're putting toys in here, if we're really using it, put something down in the bottom to hold and to give it kind of that texture. If you are going to be doing this out of nice fabrics, you may want to use an interfacing, something that gives it some stiffness so that this does give a point, and add a pom-pom or jingle bell or something down here as well. This is one of my favorite methods to do when I have a little bit of time and when I have scraps, and who doesn't have scraps? We're starting with some kind of a base. This is just some batting that I had left over, but I can use blue jeans. You can see I've got a shirt here. I can use all kinds of things, bags that are out there. What I did originally was I traced the template, and you can see there, that's the beginning of the template. That way I'm not wasting all this fabric, and I'm trying to keep it right along the edge. And Ben's going to hand me the elf stocking. When we look at this elf stocking, you can see I basically got it, so it's just a little bit more fabric than what I need. When I go to cut, this is going to give me that really cool look. This, I started with the center piece and actually started right here, and I stitched it down and stitched it down. Do you notice right here, though, the fabric is showing? I need to go trim that fabric before I stitch this next one down. So be aware that your darker fabrics will show through the lighter fabrics if you don't trim them down. And they call this flip and stitch and sew and flip and sew and all kinds of things. It's really simple, but it's using up all of those scraps, and it really makes a cute quilt. And these are a cute stocking, and these can be done out of all those scraps that you have left over too, from packages and presents and clothing as well. I love taking clothing, and when you hit the garage sales and you hit Goodwill and all those places, go to the extra largest sizes and look for real estate. I've got a lot of real estate here, and when we look at the front side, look for pockets too. Pockets are great to add on stockings. If you're going for a country western theme, then stick in a bandana in there. If we're not going for that, then stick in a gift card. Just make sure it's sticking out so that they know that they're getting something besides that stocking. I love getting the fabrics that give it a little bit of texture as well, and so you can see here, solid piece of fabric on the back. I don't want the ones where I have seams going through. I like how they fit on you, but those seams take away from my ability to use that as a whole piece of fabric. So look for those materials in your back closets as well. So I love really quick and easy projects and simple techniques too. This is one of those cool things that I don't know where I found it, but I love it. This is the magic stocking. What we're going to be doing is doing the outside, the inside, and a lining all at the same time, cutting at the same time, sewing at the same time. Here I've used the dog paw stocking, but you can use any of our stockings. It really doesn't matter. The concept is going to be the same. So what I'm going to do is have this for my outside fabric. So I've got right sides together. I'm going to place those down on my table first. Now I'm going to do it in direction of you guys rather than in me. So if you look, my fabric has direction, so I have to be aware that I've got that on the front and back. Next thing we're going to do is take a thin piece of lining or batting. This is not as thin as I would like, but you get the idea. We're going to place this down. Next thing we're going to do is take our two pieces of our lining. And again, there's direction on here. What I've done is cut these pieces big enough for the template, but not a whole lot more because I just don't want to waste extra fabric. So we've done the outside, we've done a piece of batting, and what I really do on mine is I take old tablecloths, old sheets, those kinds of things, and this goes inside. It just gives it a little bit more stability, so it's not like I really need the batting. I'm going to line all of these up to the ends, and then I have one more thing that I need to do. I'm going to grab, this is that one more piece of batting. And again, the sheet, the tablecloth, whatever it is. It can even be those bags that you've gotten from, you know, the trade shows and things like that. Okay, so if you notice here, I've got all of these together. I've got them stacked together. Now this is when that Martelli 60mm rotary cutter really comes in handy. When I go to cut, this rotary cutter is going to allow me to cut. I'm not going to take the time and cut all the way through, but I want you to see. See what that's doing? Look how thick that is. That 60mm is amazing. We'd cut around as I go to cut. I'm turning the template, cutting, either cutting off or cutting around, cutting around, cutting around, and done. When we're done with that, it turns into this. Now, I've sewn at the sewing machine, so pretend that this is cut, but it hasn't been sewn. I don't go to the sewing machine like this. I go to the sewing machine like this. So I'm basically turning this upside down. I find I have better luck stitching with a batting or a fusible or something on the sewing machine surface rather than under my needle. We're going to stitch 3 sides all the way around. From here to here, back stitching, just like we do on all of our projects that we do. Snip, snip, snip. We've got snippets that are amazing. I love these guys. Snip, snip, snip. Or we can use our embroidery scissors. Both of these are super sharp and they'll get in there really fast and easy. You don't have to be that careful about it. Okay, here's the magic. What I'm going to do is go inside. Lining, lining. So I'm going to reach in. We're going to grab. I'm going to twist, pull that out. And just like Ben said, it's not going to be real pretty right now, but you're going to take the time to get those fingers in or whatever you need to get those seams nice and open. But we're not done yet because that's the lining. So I'm going to now go to my outside, 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 put my hand in, and we're going to turn that again. And at this point, this is when I have the iron plugged in and I make sure that it's nice and ready to go. And I'm fingering a little bit, but you get the idea. Look what I've got. I've got the beginning of almost a finished stocking. What are we going to do? Are we going to add a cuff on here or not? I don't need a cuff because for this dog paw, I'm basically going to be folding this down. I think I'm just looking at it and looking at this. Oh, I forgot. I do need, because see this fabric? That's directional. So that tells me I need to do something. So what do I need to do over here? When I look at this fabric, this is going to be my cuff. But that fabric, again, directionally is not going to work for me. So I'm going to grab this fabric. Do you see how directionally this will work? So we're going to be basically stitching this. Now, what I've done is folded here. I really want to have the fold here and have the raw edge there. Because as we go to stitch, if I decide that I don't want the length here, by the way, instead of having this, I can cut this down. But when we go in, we're going to stitch these guys together here. So imagine I'm going to open this up. I'm going to stitch these guys here together. We're going to turn that. We're going to fold it. And we're going to place that inside. We're going to be looking at right sides, though. And this would be folded down, stitched together. And this is going to go inside here. And I'm going to stitch that around. Raw edge to raw edge. Raw edge to raw edge. When I stitch that around, then this is going to fold over like a traditional cuff would be on a stocking, and then that would show. Again, the direction is what matters here. If you had a fabric inside for the lining, then this is the way I like to do it. So let's go back to mine and I'll show you. I cheat. I folded it down, I stitched. I really would take the time to fold down one more time and stitch, top stitch, so I don't have a raw edge there, but how much time do I have? If I don't have a whole lot of time, I can even take one of those peel-off tapes or permanent glues or whatever, or even just add a button and a button and a button and a button, jingle bells, whatever it is. But this magic stocking is such a quick, easy way to do it assembly line. Cut, 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 sew, press, press, press. That process, you can get through these super fast and really nice, and I love them. You can create stockings with the paw template, just like we did in the previous 2 versions. But what's really cool about this is we have the paw pad and the paw prints themselves. You're going to get one of the paw pads, and then you'll get one of these. You're going to be creating 4 of these. Now, you can use the fusible if you want, and if you do that, then you can trace onto, with a chalk pencil, onto the fusible or a pen, and then press it on your fabric. But depending on the base fabric that you have here, you may not even need to use a fusible. When we're cutting around here, I can cut with a rotary cutter fairly easily here, but this is going to be tough, and this is certainly going to be tough. So what we want to do is trace around, and then use our embroidery scissors or those snippets to cut those out. And then you simply are going to either stitch those on top, press those on top, and then stitch. And when you stitch, we'll use a buttonhole or a satin stitch or however you like to finish that off. You can even use a marking pen and go right around and draw your stitch lines if you use a fusible. And this makes some really cute stockings. So we hope we've given you some good inspiration. It's never too early to get started for Christmas, even in the hot days of summertime here in Florida.